Istanbul, Turkey, October 4th, 2025. Good evening and welcome to this special in-depth report from Istanbul. A potentially historic moment has unfolded in the long and bloody saga of the Gaza conflict. Standing before the national and international press at the presidential complex in Ankara, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan declared that Hamas has shown, as it has done many times before, that it is ready for peace. Thus, a window of opportunity has opened for lasting peace in our region. That single sentence, blunt, unambiguous, and delivered with the gravitas of a man who has been central to the region's diplomacy for nearly 2 decades, has injected new hope into negotiations that many observers had come to see as futile. For years, the relationship between Turkey and Hamas has been both a cornerstone and a stumbling block in regional talks. While the United States and many European countries classify Hamas as a terrorist organization, Ankara has maintained an open line of communication, arguing that no meaningful peace could be reached without engaging the group directly. Erdogan's statement on this October evening therefore carried weight far beyond a routine press appearance. By declaring that Hamas is ready for peace, the Turkish leader signaled that the group's response to a new initiative from US President Donald Trump might be more than just a tactical maneuver. The context makes this announcement especially significant. Only days earlier, President Trump publicly revealed what he described as a last chance framework for ending the fighting in Gaza, a conflict that, after years of cyclical violence, has devastated communities on both sides and repeatedly derailed wider diplomatic efforts in the Middle East. President Erdogan spoke in a tone that mixed optimism with a note of urgency. He reminded his audience that opportunities for peace have come and gone before, often lost to mistrust, renewed fighting, or external pressures. Recep Tayyip Erdogan said, "Hamas has shown, as it has done many times before, that it is ready for peace. Thus, a window of opportunity has opened for lasting peace in our region." By repeating this line, Erdogan underscored that Turkey views this moment not as a mere pause in hostilities, but as the potential start of a new chapter. He went on to stress that the region must not allow the opportunity to slip away once again. He cautioned that spoilers, whether extremists on the ground or political hardliners abroad, could quickly derail the fragile opening if decisive steps were not taken. The road to this moment has been long and fraught. Hamas, founded in the late 1980s, has been at the center of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict since it took control of Gaza in 2007. The group's history of armed struggle and rocket attacks on Israeli territory has defined it in the eyes of many Western governments as a militant organization beyond the pale of negotiation. Turkey, however, has consistently argued that Hamas represents a significant portion of the Palestinian population and that excluding it from talks would doom any effort at a sustainable settlement. Over the past 2 decades, Ankara has positioned itself as both a critic of Israeli policies in Gaza and a mediator willing to host Palestinian factions. At the same time, relations between Turkey and Israel have swung between cautious cooperation and open hostility, often reflecting the intensity of fighting in Gaza. This historical backdrop explains why Erdogan's remark that Hamas is ready for peace was so closely scrutinized by diplomats across the Middle East and in Western capitals. If Hamas has indeed signaled readiness to engage in a US-backed peace framework, and if Turkey is prepared to act as a guarantor or facilitator, the dynamics of the conflict could shift dramatically. The peace plan at the center of this moment originates from Washington. Since returning to office in January, President Trump has sought to reassert US influence in the Middle East. In late September, he presented what he called a comprehensive, fair, and lasting framework aimed at ending the cycle of violence. The proposal reportedly includes a phased ceasefire, the release of Israeli hostages held in Gaza, a gradual lifting of the Israeli blockade under international monitoring, and a roadmap for political negotiations toward a long-term settlement. While full details remain under wraps, the plan's initial reception among regional players has been mixed. Israel's government has expressed guarded support, but continues to insist that Hamas must first disarm and recognize Israel's right to exist. Hamas, for its part, has refrained from outright rejection, a notable shift from its usual rhetoric, and has engaged in quiet consultations with mediators from Qatar, Egypt, and Turkey. Erdogan's endorsement of Hamas's readiness for peace reflects not just Ankara's position, but also Turkey's desire to reassert itself as a regional power broker. For years, Turkey has offered itself as a bridge between the West and the Palestinian factions, emphasizing its unique status as a NATO member with strong historical and cultural ties to the Arab world. That role has at times brought Ankara into sharp dispute with Israel and occasionally strained its relations with Washington. Yet the possibility of a breakthrough has once again put Turkey in the diplomatic spotlight. In his remarks, Erdogan made it clear that Turkey sees this as a historic opening that requires collective responsibility. He noted that regional and international stakeholders, from the Gulf states to the United States and the European Union, must act with urgency and restraint to give the peace framework a genuine chance to succeed. Analysts caution that while Hamas's apparent willingness to engage is significant, it is far from a guarantee of progress. Skeptics point out that previous rounds of negotiations have faltered over fundamental issues: the status of Jerusalem, the right of return for Palestinian refugees, Israeli security concerns, and Hamas's refusal to renounce armed resistance. Still, Erdogan's emphasis on Hamas's repeated expressions of readiness for peace suggests that Ankara believes the group's position has evolved in response to the staggering human and economic toll of the conflict. The Turkish leader also warned that international attention must not drift away. He argued that the people of Gaza, exhausted by years of blockade and bombardment, need tangible improvements in their daily lives to build confidence in any peace process. Erdogan's remarks quickly drew responses from regional capitals and global powers. In Cairo and Doha, officials welcomed the statement as a hopeful sign. European diplomats noted cautiously that Turkey's engagement could help bridge the gap between Hamas and Israel, but stressed that confidence-building measures would be crucial. In Washington, the Trump administration described Erdogan's comments as encouraging, though US officials privately acknowledged that translating goodwill into an enforceable agreement remains a formidable challenge. Israeli officials reacted more coolly, pointing to Hamas's continued military capabilities and the group's past record of breaking ceasefires. Nevertheless, even in Israel, some voices in the security establishment have argued that the cost of perpetual conflict is unsustainable and that any credible opportunity for dialogue should be explored. Behind the headlines and the geopolitical maneuvering lies a profound human story. The conflict in Gaza has left thousands dead, tens of thousands injured, and whole neighborhoods reduced to rubble. Families on both sides of the border live under constant threat, from airstrikes, rocket fire, and periodic escalations that seem to follow a grimly predictable cycle. Erdogan's statement, by framing Hamas as willing to seek peace, has raised fragile hopes among many in the region that the suffering could finally be alleviated. Human rights organizations have echoed the call for sustained diplomacy, emphasizing that a credible peace process must prioritize humanitarian relief, reconstruction, and the protection of civilians. As the diplomatic machinery grinds into motion once again, several questions loom large. Can the US and Turkey together exert enough leverage to bring both Hamas and Israel to commit to meaningful concessions? Will regional powers like Egypt, Qatar, and Saudi Arabia provide the necessary backing and guarantees? And perhaps most critically, will the populations on the ground, Israelis and Palestinians alike, trust that this time will be different? For now, what stands out is the rare alignment of statements from two leaders who have often found themselves at odds: Erdogan in Ankara and Trump in Washington. Both have publicly framed the moment as a chance for a lasting peace. Whether that chance will be seized or squandered may depend as much on the political will of leaders as on the resilience of ordinary people who have endured decades of conflict. As we report from Istanbul tonight, the atmosphere remains cautious but palpably more hopeful than it has been in years. The Turkish president's assertion that Hamas is ready for peace has set in motion a new round of discussions that could either open a path to reconciliation or, like so many before, collapse under the weight of mutual distrust and entrenched grievances. For a region weary of war, the stakes could not be higher. Observers note that the next few weeks will be critical in determining whether this window of opportunity expands into a lasting diplomatic breakthrough or closes once again, leaving the Middle East mired in the same familiar cycle. The eyes of the world are now on Ankara, Washington, Jerusalem, and Gaza City, watching to see whether history will turn toward peace or slide back into conflict.
Hamas daha önce defalarca yaptığı gibi barışa hazır olduğunu gösterdi. Böylece bölgemizde kalıcı barış için bir fırsat penceresi aralandı.